Sometimes, a new piece of fiction comes around with so many disparate elements of inspiration that you really just have to stop and question what was the thought process in bringing all of this together. Inevitably, a lot of the curiosity around projects like this will be driven by one simple question. Does it all work? Do these ideas come together and click to actually make something greater than the sum of its parts? Or does it spread itself too thin and it finds itself crushed under the weight of the ambition and the lofty expectations it sets out for itself? Those are some thoughts running through my mind when I was playing Eternity Egg, an indie game that released earlier this month on Steam. It's an early access release, and one I've heard of a bit thanks to exposure on Instagram. While it's getting some pretty decent sales so far, I still feel like it's kind of flying under the radar, especially in terms of discussion. And it being at such a critical point with an early access release, I wanted to throw my hat in the ring and say some of my 2 cents. But I also knew I just had to talk about the game, considering all the elements it draws together that all are up my alley. This is not a review, not a professional discussion. These are first impressions. I've only put a few hours in the game so far, and this game does not hold your hand, so I know for sure I'm missing certain things. But I think I've spent just enough time with it that I can confidently put my perspective out there, and moreover, I just want to help spread the word about it. If nothing else, the artistry and passion put into just the visuals of this game alone are enough that I think it needs to be given way more attention than it has. And while I'm on that note, let me just start about the aesthetics, because they are A+. I don't really have any notes here. I absolutely adore the trance music, which may be a bias because that's a genre I love, but wow, they do it really good. I knew I was in good hands when amongst all the other retro-sounding samples, I heard those flutes that you hear in Mario 64. It's in most of that game's soundtrack, but it's especially noticeable in the file select if you need an example of what I mean. Back to Eternity Egg, the graphics are amazing, the old school vibe is immaculate. I just love these throwback styles in general when they're done right, but I can't say I've seen a single indie try their hand at a style like this before. It's this really cool 90s CG style that it's reminiscent of a lot of things, but for me, it gives really strong Osamu Sato vibes, particularly Roly-Poly's no Nanakorobi Yoki, but some of the atmosphere does also just give LSD Dream Emulator vibes. The over 3-minute long opening really nails the FMV vibe, and it really feels like something from a game of the era. It gives me specifically Klonoa vibes, but I know that's just because I'm a huge Klonoa fan. That cutscene also just puts the music quality on display right away. I really love that the game is so confident in this musical style that you can even pick up music discs as collectibles in the world to play songs as you're just running around. But that's getting ahead of myself a little bit. I really want to highlight the main character's design because I really like it. At first, he just looks kind of silly, and he fits the style of the game really well, but once you start just getting adapted to the game's general style, and you start seeing him more in gameplay, you start to realize that he's actually got a really cool design, all things considered. It's still silly and colorful, but he's got a cool factor to him. He feels like a halfway between like a clown or a jester and a ninja, with some of his animations really tapping into that ninja aspect. And animate he does because this is a very movement-heavy game. Now getting into the gameplay, this is where, again, I want to stress these are first impressions. This is an early access game, so I both want to give feedback that can be very constructive to the developer, but I also don't want to give feedback that might end up harming the game in the long run. Giving feedback during early access can be pretty difficult. There's sort of a trap you can fall into where you could say that an aspect of a game is poorly designed or unfun, when it just simply hasn't been figured out yet. And especially considering a lot of Eternity Egg's inspirations are the sort of games that have a lot of friction at the start and require a player to adjust to them, I want to make sure what I'm giving feedback on has types of areas that genuinely can be improved from the game's perspective, not the sort of areas that a player is expected to get better as they play. But that leads into a discussion about what is both one of the most interesting parts of the game, and I would consider a bit of a strength, but a part that is also a really hard hill to climb. This game does not tell you anything. Maybe even to degrees that it really should. Again, to speak of the inspirations, Eternity Egg is not only inspired by a lot of other movement-based platformers, but also has a surprising amount of influence from Dark Souls. I was expecting to make a joke about 1 or 2 mechanics being based on it, but the more I played, the more I felt that aspect. Even some of the presentation surprisingly feels like it takes a note from Souls, such as the text that appears to tell you the area you're in, complete with a pretty similar noise. The starting area, Idiot's Domain, also just reminded me of areas like Cemetery of Ash or Anor Londo, and the way it's like weirdly suspended in air. It isn't unheard of for platformers, especially earlier ones or more complicated ones, to simply give the player the controls and expect them to figure them out in a safe environment first. And Dark Souls thrives both in the story and in the gameplay, in keeping the player on the dark and keeping them on their toes, trying to figure out the world themselves. That is to say, I understand that Eternity Egg is a game that is almost certainly not going to want to be handholdy. While I could say where I am now, I enjoy the feeling of freedom of simply being able to go anywhere, having figured out the game to a certain degree, but knowing there's so much more I don't know. The start is incredibly rough, and I can understand it completely turning some people off. I, like many others, got stuck nearly for an hour in the first area, simply because the game does not communicate many things to you. I've seen that the developer already plans to add a more proper tutorial in the future, but it's still something to be observed both for the game and the state it's in, and for just the general learning curve of the game. I hope that whenever this tutorial is added, it can strike a balance between giving players enough of a push in the right direction to alleviate some of these issues, without getting so handholdy that it loses some of the aspect of the game. I've heard this game compared to other, quote, kinetic platformers, which emphasize fast and snappy movement. I don't have too much experience or interest in other games like this, but I can certainly attest to the fact that Eternity Egg is a very fast game. The movement is very strange, does take a lot of getting used to, but it is very fun once you get the hang of it. The air dashes and wall climbs especially are awesome, though both can be very janky. I play on controller, and I've had a very difficult time getting the sideways wall run to work. The game almost always defaults to vertical wall climbs. It's also worth mentioning that, yes, this is an early access game, so it's to be expected, but I've clipped through the environment a lot in my little time with the game. And while flying my ship around in the Overworld, I've had it explode on me for no reason. I haven't recorded much of it, but I've had a lot of times where I just fall into part of the environment or fall out of the map. The game features a stamina system, which is tricky, and I think it could use some room to improve, but I also appreciate the fact that it exists as a limiter to stop players from just being able to sail across the environment completely. At least, mostly. In the right circumstances, you could still get a crazy amount of air dashes off. But it feels like it stops the game from just kind of invalidating any actual need for careful movement, because you do have to plan out what you're doing. Even if you have a lot, environments are big, and a lot of places you really have to be a little careful with where you go. If you don't take time to plan ahead where you're going in advance, you only have so much stamina to recover if you mess up. However, your pole bounce ability, which not only is good for building momentum, also lets you build stamina back up, which is really nice, I think. I feel like it alleviates a problem many stamina systems have, where the punishment is just stop playing the game for a little bit, and it's so unfun and just boring. You can't still stop dead in your tracks to build back stamina, but if you feel the situation is safe or you're just very confident in your abilities with the pogo bounce, you can use that to build up stamina even faster, which can be really fun and dynamic because it can let you move forward and get your stamina back, encouraging some real on-the-fly thinking to chain movement together with the stamina you just got back. Alternatively, you could just stop dead in your tracks and do a couple sets of bouncing on another platform before you keep climbing back up. It overall feels like it's a better system to pace yourself than most stamina systems just being a full-on stop. Now your stamina bar can actually be increased along with many of your other abilities because, as I said before, this game takes a surprising amount of inspiration from Dark Souls. When you break pottery or defeat enemies in the game, you collect the currency, which reminds me of the currency in Spyro, which, that's peak. Most pots just give you currency, but some pots and all enemies give you energy that's basically like souls. You won't have a use for them until outside of the second area, but once you do, you can bring them to what are essentially bonfires and give a certain amount to receive points to level up some stats. There are 6 stats, which, again, the game doesn't really tell you what they do, but they are bounce, speed, power, life, luck, and ecstasy. As I understand though, they affect more or less every aspect of your movement, and I have mixed thoughts about this. I can't say I've really run into any moments where the game feels like it requires a level up. It's more so a system to reward you to keep playing. As your skill as a player improves, so do your stats, and that can allow you to do more things you wouldn't be able to do before. I just hope it could feel like this system has a purpose and the game is built around it to a degree. We haven't seen the logical endpoint of these stats yet, so it's hard to say for sure, but I can imagine how something like this, in a platformer, could eventually let a player be so strong they simply trivialize all the actual platforming, or alternatively require such a grind to just be able to do challenges that are otherwise near impossible. Dying in this game also has a mechanic similar to the soul retrieval from the Souls series. When you die, you lose all your energy, and it's left on the spot where you were dead. You can go back and get it, but only once. If you die again, it's gone forever. At first, I kind of had a negative impression about this because it feels like it doesn't really serve as strong a purpose as it does in the Souls games. In those games, it feels like an ever-looming threat to either invest your points as soon as you get them, or to play very carefully when you hold on to them. When you die, you need to play really carefully to try and recover them, either avoiding enemies completely, or taking them extremely slowly to pick them off one by one. It adds to the risk-reward balancing in Dark Souls, which I feel like isn't really something that exists in Eternity Egg. I got most of my points just by smashing pots. I don't really engage in the combat much in this game. The souls in Dark Souls come as a reward for what is both the core of the game and the most challenging part. You get souls by engaging in the thing that can also get rid of all your souls, combat. I'll talk about it more later. This game has combat, but it's not really that great, and it's only one avenue to get the energy. So if you die, there really isn't anything stopping you from just going around and grinding pots out, so it doesn't really feel like the punishment aspect is there. It's less this moment of, oh no, I need to play a lot more carefully to get my souls back, and to avoid that in the future, and just, oh no, I gotta go break some pots. That said though, I do like that the system encourages you to go back where you died, because more often than not, you'll probably end up dying exploring a new or semi-new area to you. You feel more encouraged to go back right to where you were before, so instead of saying, oh, I'll just come back to that later, if you're gonna already go there for your souls, you might as well go deeper and deeper in, and it encourages you to finish the job. Again, this feels like a feature that I've yet to see enough to say one way or the other that I like it or dislike it. It's hard to say exactly where it's going to contribute to the game's gameplay loop, if in a positive or a negative way. One thing I'm not very fond about it contributing to though is the boss fights, which are a pretty weak area of the game, all things considered. I think it's a fairly common sentiment that platformers tend to not do combat great when they try to go more in depth. Unfortunately, I feel like Eternity Egg falls into that trap too. It clearly wants a higher emphasis on combat, and I appreciate that, but so far, it really feels like it's lacking in the game. Boss fights tend to be against giant enemies, which makes sense for a platformer, but they're not really that engaging. You usually just have to scale up an area and try and hit them on the head. They're either the types of fights that are very easy to cheese, or that are extremely annoying just because you have to come back and forth climbing up and down just to hit them. The fact that your air attacks also grant an air dash, so you can't really spam them as easily against these enemies while you're airborne, it really doesn't help either. I have a hard time picking out exactly what a lot of the flaws in the combat system are, just that I know it doesn't feel great. Feedback is probably one of the biggest things, because it's really hard to tell when you're actually hitting an enemy for damage, especially later when ones with shields start showing up. I don't need the game to go crazy with effects or anything, but I really do feel like it can use a little more for a player to be able to know if they're doing well in combat or not. It overall feels quite sluggish, especially during boss fights, and considering the game seems to have a bit of a focus on boss fights, I hope it's something the developer can iron out later down the line. Lastly, there's a lot of NPCs around the game that are all really interesting characters. A lot of them just have things to say that are just kind of abstract statements that might not mean anything, but you have a good amount of fetch quests and other quests in the game. Your main one seems to be around collecting chaos cores, which can be found in Overworld. There's a couple other collectibles that can be found in Overworld, such as entropic worms that come from boss fights, but a lot of worlds have very specific collectibles or objectives, some of which you might need to come back to later with a certain item. Even the NPCs have a bit of a Souls tinge to them, but for the most part, they'll just give you some kind of collection or fetch quest. I think they do an amazing job of giving you direction in the game. As I said, it's a very non-handholdy game, but that combined with the freedom of movement means that once you start getting going, exploring every nook and cranny of the world to find what's hiding there is really fun. Though there's times where it really does feel like I could use a little more direction. I feel like all of that summarizes the state the game is in pretty well. It's very large, sometimes empty, but sometimes exciting and dynamic. Very open, and it doesn't tell you where to go. It can be hard to find the line in something that's just half-baked and still trying to get some time in the oven as this game's being worked on, and what just requires more out of you, the player, to actually get the most of it. The game's very abstract and strange atmosphere is really exemplified by the fact that it is being worked on. Some people will probably love that aspect about it, and some people will probably hate it, that you can't tell what is and isn't intentional design, and most it's a symptom of the fact that the game still needs some time to be fully finished. Even as a fully complete game some years down the line, I'm sure this is going to be a pretty polarizing game, only appealing to certain people. But especially in its early access state, it can be pretty understandable how it might not be for everybody. While there's more than you might expect out of the game, $20 is still a pretty steep asking price, especially for the sort of game that might filter out a lot of people in the early hour. But I think there's also going to be a lot of people who will love sinking their teeth in this game, both in the depth of its movement system, and the mysteries and non-linearity of it all. So would I recommend it? I want to say yes, but it's hard to say that with complete confidence. While I'm enjoying it now, I'm even still unsure if I've gotten my value out of it just yet. But I think for people who hear all of this and think that this sounds like a really enticing game, it might just be worth it. And even if it's not something that sounds like it would be up your alley right now, I think this is a game you should keep your eye on. The work and effort put in by developer Userlands in this game is nothing short of remarkable, and I think they deserve a lot of praise just for that. I wish them the best in developing this game, which I'll hopefully be along for the ride, and I think it's a story that people should really be following, for the movement fiends who love the gameplay, or just people who find the aesthetic interesting. I know some early access games tend to not make the finish line, and even some of those that do are met with more controversy than they would be with praise, but I only wish the best for Userlands. I hope in a couple years down the line, we could see a fully finished Eternity Egg that is nothing short of a masterpiece. But as it stands now, it's a very interesting concept, a lot of rough edges, but a lot to love in the center. Some people are going to adore it, some might not, and some will need some time to even figure that out for themselves. But I hope my thoughts here have helped you to figure out which camp you might fall into. And if nothing else, now you have a good soundtrack that you can bump when you need some trance tunes. Hey, thanks for watching. This is the first time I'm actually doing a spoken outro like this, so excuse me if it's not perfect, but I didn't plan on doing another video for this year, and I don't consider this a super high average video like my last few. But this game ended up being something that caught my eye enough that I really wanted to speak on it. There's not a lot of coverage out there yet, and I wanted to get my words out there, especially for people who might end up liking this game. Hopefully some of the people who followed me for my Pseudo Regalia video might end up liking this too. This is definitely going to be my last video before the year ends though. I want to take until then, and maybe a little bit after, to figure out a bit more of what I want to do with this whole YouTube thing. I have a lot of video ideas and other things, but I also just want to sit down and reevaluate some things. I know my following is pretty microscopic right now, but I really do appreciate the people that have subbed, and even the people that have left really nice comments telling me that my video quality is a lot more than you expected out of someone so small. YouTube has become a creative outlet that I didn't think would be this easy or natural for me to do, and it's been really satisfying, even if it's a bit tough to really break out like how many other people do. I've been trying to take constructive criticism and feedback from my friends and from the audience alike. I'm always open to that kind of stuff, just keep it constructive, please. On a similar note, this should be my last video with this mic. I got a much higher quality one, which I should have set up soon, which will hopefully be much better for you guys to listen to. I've got certain plans going into the new year, some ideas, like potentially trying streaming if there's an audience for that, but I think I'll save any talk for that for any kind of future update video or anything like that where I kind of want to gauge that. I just wanted to give a little touch up on things considering this is my last video for the year. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you listen to this and you aren't subbed, well, maybe sub? I don't know, I hate asking for subs, but like, I would appreciate it. Maybe check out some of my other videos. But yeah, thank you guys. I hope you have a great new year.